Hi, I'm Natalie Bouchard, and you're listening to Inside NC Labor, a podcast designed to inform and educate North Carolina citizens on the role that the Department of Labor plays in state government. Hi everyone, welcome to Inside NC Labor. We have Chief of Staff Britt here with us. Art, would you care to introduce yourself?
No, thank you, Natalie. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks so much. I'm Britt. I'm the Chief of Staff for Commissioner Berry in the North Carolina Department of Labor. I actually started with the Department of Labor 19 and a half years ago, January 22nd to be exact, 2001. Prior to that, I worked for 4 years as Government Affairs Liaison, Department of Commerce, and 2.5 years before that, I worked in then Governor Jim Martin's office handling constituent affairs on the toll-free hotline, which was a great experience. And then I was special assistant to his general counsel, a gentleman by the name of Jim Trotter. I've been in state government I started in state government 35 years ago. Been with the department for almost 19 and a half years.
This is Dolores Questenberry, everybody. I'm the communications director at the Department of Labor. Art has been here, I believe, longer than anybody in Commissioner Berry's administration.
That would be an honor, but actually I am second only to Joyce Bullock, her executive assistant, who actually came in during the transition. Now, technically, if we want to play this game of who was first, I actually worked on Commissioner Berry's, or with Commissioner Berry's, or then Representative Berry's campaign for Commissioner of Labor. So I actually started back as early as 2000, but technically speaking, with the administration, I'm the second oldest rat in the barn.
And hopefully JJ will forgive me for not remembering that she was number one.
I doubt she will, but that's between you and JJ.
Can you just walk us through the beginning of the administration? Just give us a little history of that transition.
No, I'd be glad to. I may suggest some things that sound political, and they're not. What I'm trying to do is actually paint the landscape of Raleigh in January of 2001 when Shree Berry and her small staff first took office. Of course, we succeeded former Commissioner Harry Payne. Commissioner Berry, then Representative Berry and Commissioner Payne did not run against each other. Commissioner Payne was leaving office of his own volition, so there was a very smooth transition there. The interesting thing is the only statewide elected Republican at the time were in state government, not federal level. Of course, the commissioner was looking for people that had some experience that may be of her political persuasion, and it was a little hard putting people together because there weren't that many Republicans with any state government experience in Raleigh at the time. So I was fortunate with my experience to get on with her early on. We, like anybody else, there was no playbook, there was no primer. We had to learn what labor was all about on our own, which was a little bit daunting because, as you can imagine, with any new state agency, just learning the acronyms seemed to take me longer than anything else. But the commissioner got her team together, and she learned early on that her role was not to sit in Raleigh, not to sit behind a desk. That was contrary to her personality, but it was also contrary to her style. She just felt that she had to go out and talk to anybody, any civic group, any Rotary Club, any organization of two or more people that wanted to sit down and talk to her about the mission of the Department of Labor. She took that on as her charge and as her mission, and it became her trademark. The only reason Shree Berry would ever say no to a scheduling request is if there was a scheduling conflict, and then she would try her best to remedy the conflict and to do everything she was invited to do. So she lived on the road. By now, it's common knowledge, or should be common knowledge, that she drives her own vehicle. She travels at her own expense. The state of North Carolina has never reimbursed her for a penny of travel. And you may ask, well, how much can a person travel? Well, we have kept up with the commissioner's travel for a lot of reasons, for several reasons. But the fact of the matter is the commissioner has traveled within the confines of North Carolina, just Manteo to Murphy. She has traveled over 9.5 times around the equivalent of traversing the world. So she's done all that on her own dime, at her own expense. She went out there. Her mission was to hire good people to run the store, And she was to go out there and tell people that the Department of Labor is not a bad thing. They're not bad guys. If you will invite us in, we will help you make your workplace safer. Sometimes that was hard to do because, as everybody knows, we have a compliance component with the department where if we find that you are not providing a safe work environment for your employees, we, of course, have an obligation to cite you for that. But she's always tried to apply her compliance activity with very fair and very measured, but at the same time complying with her constitutional and legal obligations. So that's kind of the tone she set early on, and it has served her very well for these going on 19 and a half years.
Yeah, the commissioner has been a big proponent of education and training, consultation. She wanted the employers to feel like they could call us,
exactly,
as
right,
opposed to fearing calling the Department of Labor.
Exactly. We often kind of equate it to doing your taxes. You're balancing your checkbook. You would never call the IRS and say, "Hey, could you mind guys come here and help me balance my checkbook?" It's like, no, I don't want you to see where my money is. Well, it's the same thing when Commissioner Berry suggested early on, call us and we will come to you and we will point out ways that you can make your workplace safer. People were skeptical. You just want to get in our building. You want to just look behind the curtain and see what's going on. Well, not only was that in no way, shape, or form Commissioner Berry's motive, legally we can. Our consultative and training folks, if they go into your workplace and help you make your workplace safer, if they find things that need to be corrected, they actually by law cannot share those with their brethren or sisterin over in the compliance side of the department. So not only can you trust us because we say you can trust us, but you can trust us because it's against the law for us to rat you out.
Art, what are some other pivotal points in Commissioner Berry's administration?
First year we were here, the country was burdened with the 9/11 tragedy. Here we are, almost 20 years later, and we're going through a national crisis with COVID-19. You would think, what does that have to do with us? Well, especially COVID-19, it makes our job more difficult to go out here and interact with businesses. But 9/11, marked, though we were 9 months into this job, we were still very new. And that changed the way we look at things in terms of our general safety. And so we learned that those are things that we need to look at. Unfortunately, there was a tragedy associated with the dust explosion in Kinston early on, many, many years ago. But it helped us to look for things, and we don't know how many lives that has saved or injuries that have been prevented because of our knowledge of that. And that's part of the evolution of monitoring safety. With technology and people changing the way they do things, naturally you try to keep up with monitoring, are those processes safe? Which is hard to believe. People listening to this today, 20 years ago, cell phones were not nearly as prevalent as they are now. And as the industry was expanding, we were putting up cell phone towers more rapidly around the state, and that meant that people were having to go up in these towers and maintain them. Not just the maintenance of installing a new antenna or sometimes going up and just painting them. And unfortunately, North Carolina experienced some tragedies where, not really having specific guidelines dealing with cell towers, people were dying. So we took it on our own to help develop a tower standard for OSH, which once again, it was part of the evolutionary process. New technology brought in new structures brought in new exposures. New exposures led us to develop hopefully some safety precautions and safety standards to hopefully keep people safe. Same thing with cranes. North Carolina is a growing economy. 20 years ago, I don't know that you saw as many cranes because I don't know that the technology, now a crane can be fitted on the back of a truck or and then of course you see the construction cranes, but we were noticing we were having more instances of cranes actually malfunctioning, and not only were they a hazard to employees who may be working in proximity to the cranes, but there was a passerby who unfortunately a crane malfunction, lost its load and fell on a pedestrian, a citizen. So we developed one of the first crane standards in North Carolina. Those take years and years and years to develop, because you have to hear from the affected parties, the soon-to-be regulated industry, everybody that operates, associates, has anything to do with a crane in the case of the crane standard. So those are some things that we're pleased that we were a part of. It's just unfortunate that it was brought about by people getting hurt, but hopefully lives have been saved and injuries prevented by us taking the initiative to develop those ourselves.
It's going to be part of Commissioner's legacy. One of the things I'd like you to just talk about, I know we've spoken about it before, because it was a big change in a way, when we added the photo of Commissioner to the elevator.
Yes. No, thanks for bringing that up. It was a combination of things. I mean, the Commissioner has gotten a lot of recognition out of that, and we're pleased, of course, for a lot of obvious reasons. But of course, a great weight accompanies that, because by putting it's one thing to put your name on something and people not associate your name with your face. But whenever you're an elected official and actually put your photograph on something that you are responsible for its safety and its malfunction can have detrimental repercussions, it's really a pretty bold move. But early on, and some people claim it was done for political reasons. Well, the fact of the matter is, first 4 years of the Commissioner's first term, there were no photographs in the elevator. That the suggestion was made to her, in part, Commissioner, what would you think about putting your photograph on, And the Commissioner says, well, she goes, putting a face on state government is helpful. It's something that we don't do. I mean, if you go to the gas pump gas today, you go to the grocery store, there are elected officials who ensure the compliance that those devices that the public is exposed to operate accurately, so that your weights and measures are being accurate, because you're paying by the gallon or you're buying by the pound and that sort of thing. And you may see the elected official's signature on the little stamp, if you can find it. You take your driver's license. I think the Division of Motor Vehicles, I think the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles, I think their name is still on your driver's license, and that's all well and good. A photograph is basically a set of eyes looking at you, the user, as you're using the product that has been guaranteed to be safe, and that it says it's safe, not just my signature, but my face on this. It says that it's safe for you to ride this device, because by now most people know that we've got one of the most rigorous elevator safety programs in the country. She felt very strongly about it once the suggestion was made to her, and it has benefited her a lot. Now, what it means in terms of recognition. Now, what Joe Public doesn't see is that sometimes people say, hey, you got your picture in my elevator doesn't work. I thought you guaranteed my elevator was going to work. And that's a natural reaction. It's a reaction I would have if I didn't know any better. But the fact of the matter is that the owner of the elevator is actually responsible for the maintenance of the elevator. So if an elevator malfunctions and doesn't operate properly, it's a piece of machinery. It's like your automobile. It's like your microwave. It's like anything. It's like your lawnmower. It's a piece of machinery, and if it malfunctions, then the person that owns that elevator is the one that's responsible. What we do is an annual inspection is moment in time. It's like your physical at the doctor. That moment in time where we walk away from the inspection saying that this device is safe today, and that's what Commissioner Berry wanted to do. She just wanted to say, here's my name, but also here's my face to say that this device is safe, and I endorse it 100%. That was a unique departure for most elected officials. Yes, some are very proud of what they do, but are you really proud enough to put your name and your face on the device that you're responsible for guaranteeing the safety of? And I say this, and I don't want to be melodramatic, but it is a fact, is that come election day, we're a down ballot race. Nobody really pays much attention to the Commissioner of Labor, but every single person who gets up and goes to a job, goes to a workplace, every single person that may ride an amusement device, every single person that may ride an elevator, every single person that goes into a building, a public building, your school, your hospital, nursing homes, whatever, that has a pressurized device, the Department of Labor is reaching out and touching you every day of your life. And Commissioner Berry's role is she's the only elected official in the state of North Carolina whose success and failure is measured in lives and limbs. And that's kind of a macabre way of thinking about it, but it is the seriousness of the position, which is sometimes lost when we're laughing at the elevator queen or we're at the fair enjoying, some cotton candy before we, get on a ride and spin around and get sick. Somebody has gone before, literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of North Carolinians every day. Somebody in the Department of Labor has gone before them and said that their use of certain things, certain devices, certain buildings, certain equipment in North Carolina is safe. And that's a heck of a burden to carry with you while you're elected as Commissioner of Labor. And I hope that the people of North Carolina keep that in mind, not just for Cherie Berry, but for whomever may succeed her this coming November.
What knowledge do you have to share with us about past commissioners of labor?
I was a horrible student in pretty much everything I did, formal education, but I've always loved history. I'm not saying I'm good at it. It's just something that, fortunately, I'm for the last almost 20 years now, have been able to work in the big old red brick building across from the state capitol, which is the labor building, which I absolutely love. Every day I get to come in this 100-plus-year-old building and serve the people in North Carolina. But you think back of the Department of Labor itself, and it's interesting the way it came into effect. It actually was Republican state senator who represented what was then the 12th district. His name was Locke. I'm not sure exactly, but he was a Republican from Pender and New Hanover counties, and he introduced a bill to create a Bureau of Labor Statistics. And most of us have known that the forerunner of the Department of Labor is called the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Well, you got to keep in mind, state government was so much smaller back in 1886, 1887, or 1887 when this bill was introduced. So you're not talking about the 385 employees that we have today. And then you think of why has there got to be an entire bureau just to collect labor statistics? Well, keep in mind, there were no telephones, no TVs, no internet, that sort of thing. So if you were going to collect any type of data, it was going to be very labor intensive. It was going to be creating some sort of survey and mailing that out to lists of people that were business owners in North Carolina and collecting that data. And then with any information that you collect, what do we do with the data? What picture does it tell us? Interestingly enough, I learned just from doing some weekend research that about this time, one of the largest labor unions in the country and in the state of North Carolina was an organization called the Knights of Labor. And the Knights of Labor, there was United States as well as the world was becoming more and more automated, and so the unions were experiencing a much higher popularity in the country and in the state than they do today. But the Knights of Labor actually published what they called a Declaration of Principles. It was kind of their manifesto, which is not uncommon for any organization for change. They want to publish a list of what we want to see changed. Well, interestingly enough, the third principle, they felt it was important enough, the third principle in their list of demands was, quote, the establishment of a Bureau of Labor Statistics that may arrive at a correct knowledge of the educational, moral, and financial condition of the laboring masses, end quote. So basically, the Knights of Labor wanted the government to start collecting data on workers in North Carolina. The bill passed in 1887, creating the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Apparently, from my research, and some of this was from old newspapers, the Knights of Labor positioned here in Wake County J.M. Broughton. But J.M. Broughton was apparently positioned to be the new commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Back then, the law was originally written as that the Commissioner of Labor was to be nominated by the governor and approved by the Senate, not the entire General Assembly, the Senate. So at the last minute, then sitting Governor Alfred Scales, apparently in an effort to slight the labor unions, the Knights of Labor appointed a young attorney by the name of Wesley Jones, submitted his name in nomination for Commissioner of Labor. This apparently did not sit well at all. But what was interesting is, just for perspective, Republicans technically held a majority in the House of Representatives. There were 56 Republicans, 55 Democrats, so a one-person majority. But there were also 9 what were called independent Democrats. So it's probably safe to say that in the House, though there were 56 pronounced Republicans and 55 announced Democrats, there were 9 independent Democrats, which would probably vote with Democrats. So we're not talking about the House. But over in the Senate, it was firmly Democratic. There were 30 Democrats, 17 Republicans, and 3 independent Democrats. So Mr. Wesley Jones' name was submitted to the Senate committee. They actually went into special closed session, which would be unheard of today. And it is reported that Mr. Jones was approved as Commissioner of Labor by one vote. One vote. So the department started with a little controversy. What is interesting is, and this is truly rumored in the newspapers, is that this J.M. Broughton, who was presumed to be the Knights of Labor's choice for this position, clearly did not get the position. But the governor, in an attempt, a reported attempt to assuage all parties involved, was actually going to bring Jones in. If the Senate approved, Jones would be the Commissioner of Labor. The only 2 positions in the department would be the Commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics and a clerk. Those were the only, talk about a small bureaucracy, there would only be 2 positions. The commissioner would make $1,500 a year annual salary. The clerk would make $900 a year salary. To assuage Broughton, it is reported that they offered Broughton the position of clerk but the salary of commissioner, and they offered Jones the position of commissioner but the salary of the clerk. Apparently Broughton did not, if such a deal ever existed, it was not accepted by Broughton, and so Jones went on to serve as the first Commissioner of Labor. So that's interesting. That is. And it wasn't until 1899 that there began a change in the process for naming the Commissioner of Labor. In 1899, the Commissioner of Labor was elected by the General Assembly. But 1900 was the first year that the Commissioner of Labor was elected by popular vote, and has been that way ever since. So there's a little background on how the department got started and where we are today.
We could do a whole segment on that, because I do think of you as one of the finest history buffs in the department.
Well, that's
absolutely.
Very nice.
That was interesting. I didn't even know that.
And I know you'd ask. I'm sorry. I know you'd ask also about the labor bill, which is interesting. Simultaneously with the department being created, is that the General Assembly approved $10,000 for the construction of a labor building, and of course it still stands. Has been operational since it was dedicated in March of 1888. And what's interesting is the second oldest state government building, second only to its sister across the street, the Capitol building. So if any of our listeners are traveling in Raleigh and you're at or near the Capitol, look at one of the corners and you'll see a red brick building. It's the only red brick building, and that's our beloved labor building. And interestingly, it's shaped like an L. I don't know that anybody planned it that way. It is shaped purely like an L. The boundaries are Salisbury and Eatonton Street, so we truly own the corner of East Salisbury and Eatonton Streets. The architect who designed the governor's mansion, the executive residence, also designed this building, and overseeing the construction of both buildings simultaneously. I guess we claim ours was finished first. That's why we say we're the second oldest, which would make the mansion the third oldest state government building in Raleigh. But it was done with prison labor from over at Central Prison, which was known as the state penitentiary at the time. And the construction superintendent was actually the superintendent of the penitentiary. And the prisoners actually made the brick from local quarries that they used for the construction of this building, as they did with the governor's mansion. Now, the interesting thing over the governor's mansion, if you ever go over there, you will see in some of the brick that is especially laid out for what we call today pavers, to be used for sidewalks and stuff. You will actually see brick where the inmates actually etched their names into the brick when it was still soft, and still very, very prevalent here today. I've seen the labor building stripped reasonably bare from various construction projects and renovations, and I've yet to find any signed bricks here in the labor building. But it's interesting nonetheless to know that it was made with inmate labor, and construction was supervised by the superintendent of the state penitentiary at the time. So a little background history there. Also, we were originally called the State Library Building because initially, and again, think of state government being very, very, very small, is that the center of state government was right across the street, the Capitol Building. That's where the House and the Senate met. All of their committee meetings were held either in borrowed buildings, hotel rooms, that sort of stuff, but there wasn't the vast expanse of a state government complex that we know today. But the labor building was originally two-story. If you look at old pictures, you see these beautiful domed windows that from the exterior you will see that they were the height of one floor, and then you will see a window stacked on top of that, which would represent the height of the second floor. Beautiful building. But the state library was in the upper floor, and the state Supreme Court had courtrooms on the first floor of what we now know as the labor building. Well, at some point in time early on, and I guess this is something an architect or an engineer, somebody should have figured out, but the weight of the books in the upstairs state library was too much for the structure, and the floors started buckling, which were in turn the ceilings of the Supreme Court courtrooms. So something had to be done. So maybe it's because of that, maybe weakness in engineering or planning, that the Supreme Court got its own building on the opposite side of Union Square from where we're sitting now. So, and at some point in history, they made this building, converted from a two-story to a four-story. Now, when I say that, I learned early on that it sounded as if they added 2 floors to this building. Interestingly, they did not add 2 floors. They inserted 2 floors. The building is no taller today than it was when it was dedicated in 1888, but because each of the original 2 floors were so tall, as they were actually able to insert 2 floors in what was originally the first floor, and 2 more floors in what was originally the second floor, and we are now a 4-story building with the addition of a basement. So, interesting history of the building, and it's kind of been my pleasure, if not just downright honor, to try and help maintain this building over the last 19 and a half years. And that's kind of the history of the labor building in a nutshell, a long nutshell. One thing, though, is again, the commissioner has been very gracious. She was gracious to her predecessors early on, invited them back in the building, and we don't know if we'll be invited in the building when we leave. But a couple of things to remember about Commissioner Berry is she was the first Republican elected to the Council of State in history of North Carolina, other than Governor Holshouser, who took office in 73, and Governor Martin, who took office in 85 and then again in 89, and then Lieutenant Governor Gardner, who took office in 85, and Lieutenant Governor Forrest, who took office in 2013 and then again in 2017. So she was the first, other than the governor and lieutenant governor, she was the first Republican elected to the Council of State. She was also the first Republican elected as North Carolina Commissioner of Labor. Now, there were, if you look in the history books, you will find 2 other Republicans, a James Y. Hamrick, who was appointed by the governor in 1897. He was not elected by the people. He was a Republican. And then T. Avery Nye, a Republican from Robeson County, who was appointed by Governor James Holshouser in 1972 to fill the unexpired term of the Honorable Billy Creel, who passed away in office. So Commissioner Berry was the first Republican elected as Commissioner of Labor. She was the first Republican female ever elected to the Council of State. She is the longest-serving Republican on the Council of State with her 19-plus years of service. And last year, around July 5th, 2019, she broke a record of almost 18 and a half years as the longest-serving Commissioner of Labor. The Honorable Frank Crane served from June of 1954 until his term expired in 1973. He accumulated 18 years and 7 months of service. Well, Commissioner Berry, in July 15, she surpassed that 18 years and 7 months by 1 month. So since July 5th, 2019, she has been the longest-serving Commissioner of Labor in the history of the state. So it's something she should certainly be proud of, and she is certainly beholden to the people of North Carolina who elected and re-elected her to 5 terms. So that's about all I have, Natalie and Dolores. I'm really tickled to have a chance to talk to y'all.
I'm really glad you brought that up. You mentioned that.
Yes, it's an achievement. It is a reflection of the changing times, political times. I mean, North Carolina has become more of a two-party state, and there's been some growing pains associated with that. But it's healthy for democracy, and she's taking her chances. Her very first race, she won by less than 3 votes per precinct statewide, which is close. But then you take the last election, she won by 11 percentage points over a rather popular former mayor of Raleigh. So the political tides are forever changing in North Carolina. We're a unique state, but it also reflects what has transpired here in North Carolina as it relates to the Council of State for over the last 20 years that Commissioner Berry has served. So, and I've just been pleased and proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming on, Art. We really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. And don't ask me to come back because I'll talk for 2 hours.
No,
all right.
We're having you back for sure. There's more to talk about, right, Natalie?
Oh, yeah. Thanks so much for tuning in, y'all. Remember, your safety is our priority.